Time for a wrap-up for June. Let's see how we did. First up, fiction. This is Ship of Magic by Robin Hobb, book 1 of Live Ship Traders. Fantastic book. 5 stars. Incredible writing, incredible character work, incredible storytelling, engaging in every way. It's one of those books where you're like that, instead of flipping forward in bed to see how much is left of the chapter so you can go to sleep, you're like that, oh, I've got to the end of the chapter. Just another one then. And then you crack on because it's so good. Follows the story of a trader family who own a live ship, which is a ship made of wizard wood. And the wizard wood comes to life after 3 members of the family have died on board the ship. Then the wood quickens and the figurehead comes to life. And this one's called Vivacia or Vivacia. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce it. I don't have the audio book. When I first read it in 2000, I'm sure I called it Vivacia. This time I'm trying to call it Vivacia because it looks like it's spelled the same way as acacia, and I think that's probably what it is. But yeah, I'm committed to reading one of the Realm of the Elderlings series a month. So that started out with the Farseer trilogy with Fitz. 3 of them, which is then followed up by Live Ships, another trilogy. And those are the 6 books that I've read before. But I read this in 2000, you know, memory being what it is, etc. Yeah, it's all kind of going. So it's such a trip to be reading that right now. And as my TBR for July, of course I'm on book 2 now. So I'm page 85, and again, delightful book.
It's delightful.
So that's June and July taken care of. I'm going to carry on with The Realm of the Elderlings, which is a 16 book series. So that will be the 6 I've mentioned and then the rest of them. Next, this one. I don't know how I'm going to review this one because it was absolutely epic. Natasha's Dance by Orlando Figes, A Cultural History of Russia. Outstanding book. I mean, it's as if it was written just for me. It's full, absolutely full of Russian cultural history. Starting from 1703, when Peter the Great stuck his bayonet in the ground and said, "Here shall be a town," which of course became St. Petersburg. I'm just going to let the cat in, hang on. So you'll just have to put up with her meowing because that's what she does. She meows. As soon as I hit record, it's guaranteed. She's going to be quiet all day long for hours and hours and hours. And then as soon as I hit record, in she comes. Little Willow. Wee little Willow. So, yeah, 1703, Peter the Great, St. Petersburg shall be here, and then it follows on through a cultural history. And it's a book I want to review because I loved it so much, and I'm just not sure how deep to go with that because I've taken a lot of notes. I've got a lot of things I want to say about it. That's not for here. It's just to say that it's a 5-star book. It would have more stars if that were possible. It's just, I loved it so much. And I'm following that up with another Orlando Figes book, which I'm now reading for July. So you might have seen this on my channel already because I've announced it as a read-along. A People's Tragedy, which again, it's just written so well. It's so good to get history, which can be a dry subject, to have it be written in such an accessible way. You know, I mean, it's not quite as entertaining and accessible as Live Ships or the Farseer trilogy, but as history books go, man, it's just so good. So I'm going to try and get through A People's Tragedy in July. That might be challenging because we got some holiday coming up. So I'll see how we get on. In order to finish it in July, I need to be reading 26 pages a day. And what are we now, at the 4th of July as I record this? And so far I've managed more than that just because of the way the chapters work. So the way I tend to do that, if you're interested in knowing, is that I keep a Notion database with all my books in it. And I use that to calculate how many pages I need to read per day in order to meet my goals. And so, say it's 20 pages, I'll flick through 20 pages and then I'll see if there's like a chapter marker that comes after that. I'll carry on till I get to the end of the chapter. But it's taken me a long time because I'm stopping to post about it on Instagram. I'm making some shorts as well, which you might have seen on YouTube. Just because I want to retain the information I'm reading, and it's just, there's so much in it. And I'm trying this as an experiment, as a way of taking notes. So, note-taking in Readwise, note-taking for Instagram, Kindle highlights, which I'm then exporting. You know, it's a whole thing. But I think it's going to help me to read slowly, and because I'm reading with a view to finding parts that are worth sharing, you know. So that means I'm reading more closely, and that can only be a good thing. So Natasha's Dance, highly recommended. 5 stars out of 5 and more if they were available. Highly, highly recommended. Next up, we have an impulse buy. Night Train to Odesa, which I've already posted about. I posted a review, so you can go ahead and watch that if you're interested. It's written by a young journalist called Jen Stout from the Shetland Isles in Scotland. And she found herself in Ukraine, not in Ukraine, in Russia, in the Caucasus, I believe, when the war broke out. And she was like, ooh. First of all, she was shocked, as we all were. And then she started thinking about going to Ukraine to report on the war, which she did do. And this book is her account of the places that she went, more importantly, the people that she met, the relationships that she formed. And it's a very humanitarian book. Is that the adjective you would use? Or would you say a humane book? That's what comes through, is the humanity in these relationships that she forms and in the stories that she tells. It's outstanding. Very enjoyable book. Impulse buy from Waterstones. Very glad I bought it. Jen Stout, Night Train to Odesa. Next up, another impulse buy. Boys in Zinc by Svetlana Alexievich. Boys in Zinc is a story of Afghanistan when soldiers and civilians as well from the Soviet Union went off to fight in Afghanistan. I know this author from another book of hers I've read called Second Hand Time, which I absolutely loved. I love this author's style. It's reportage, and it goes into the real raw accounts of what it was like for the people who went out to fight in Afghanistan in the late 70s and into the 80s. The Forgotten War. I mean, we know that Afghanistan is a dangerous place. I've got some friends of mine I served with in the British military who have spent time out there, and I've heard some of their stories as well, and it's like, you know, not a fun place to fight or to live. So, I mean, without going into the politics of it all, which is in here a bit because, you know, it was a political situation. The stories are brutal, some of them, violent, raw, dark, challenging, but informative, and it fills a big hole. I had no knowledge of what went down there in terms of the Russians going to Afghanistan. So it was would I say an enjoyable read? it feels like the wrong word to use because there's so much death and violence and destruction and heartache and suicide and alcoholism and, I don't think enjoyable is really the right word, but I'm glad that I read it. And as we get into the last part of the book, we go into the story of how Alexievich was sued by some of the people in the book. When the book came out, part of it was published in, was it Komsomolskaya Pravda, I think it was the newspaper it was serialised in, and she was taken to court in Belarus, which is her native country. And she had to answer to, there was a mother who was upset at the way her son was portrayed in the book. And there was a person who had given an account of their own time in Afghanistan who was then unhappy at the way it was portrayed. So that was unexpected. And it's documented. So we get some of the, what do you call it, the witness exposition, whatever that's called, the legal term for it. And some of the judges' judgments. The judges' judgments. Yeah. So that was unexpected and kind of slowed the book down a bit, and I don't know if that needed to be there, but I suppose it closes off the story in a way. I don't know. The Boys in Zinc, I think I gave it 4 stars. I think maybe that last section knocked a star off. So far, that's 1 fiction and 3 non-fiction. Final book I finished, it's another non-fiction book by Leo Tolstoy called What is Art, translated by Ilmar Maud. Should have said Boys in Zinc. It's translated by Andrew Bromfield. So obviously it was written originally in Russian. So Leo Tolstoy, this was recommended by Benjamin McAvoy in his explanatory videos on Anna Karenina in particular, War and Peace also, and maybe even Crime and Punishment, although that wasn't a Tolstoy book. I'm sure he still mentioned it in his videos about Crime and Punishment. It's a really interesting book. It's not easy to read just because the language is a bit convoluted, and Tolstoy himself took years to write this. He kept revising it, and his wife was handwriting it out for him, copy. That's what she did for him. She wrote out War and Peace as well, several times. So, yeah, it's a very, very interesting book, and I'll tell you why. If we couple it with Rick Rubin's book, The Creative Act, which I read last year, which was a 5-star, incredible book. And I read that because I'd seen some of his content around the idea of art and creativity. And it gelled very much with my own views. And in this book, we get some more of that from the 19th century. And it discusses, first of all, what is art, the title of the book. It goes into art for art's sake, which is something Tolstoy was against. It goes into how art can only really be authentic if it comes from a pure connection to source and it's not corrupted by education, aristocracy, noble beliefs. He thinks that the artists who create art that the peasantry can't understand, that they're creating it only for themselves, kind of thing, for their own level of people, that therefore isn't authentic art. Authentic art should be accessible to all, and it should be an expression of, a universal expression of one's soul. It's kind of what he's trying to say. And he talks about, the word he uses is infection, that art, one person's creation, should infect the audience, as if to say that what one is trying to express through one's art should come across and infect the audience with the same feeling that went into it. And this is something I came up with years and years and years ago when I was reading the Farseer trilogy, actually, when I first started to come up with this idea. And that came through the magic system in the Farseer trilogy, which I've made a video about, so you can go and check that out where I go into it in more depth. It's the idea that connecting to source, letting one's walls down, and perhaps going into the creative process without really knowing what it is you're going to create, and just letting the muse take over, or letting the connection take over. And the idea of, I always thought about looking at paintings in particular, or reading poetry is another example. I've always struggled with poetry, but there have been occasions when I've got it. And I get the same thing with some musicians, like Regina Spektor, for example, or Kate Bush, or Dodie. It tends to be female vocalists, I don't know why. But there are moments, like if you watch Regina Spektor's Tiny Desk concert, it makes me greet. It infects me. And that, to me, is authentic art. I got some of it watching Glastonbury as well, which has just finished, the Glastonbury Music Festival last weekend. Watching some of the artists performing, and it's, I feel infected. And I think that's what art's supposed to do. So I don't agree with everything Tolstoy talks about, because he's of the opinion that even his own novels, Anna Karenina and War and Peace, he doesn't regard, when he wrote this, which was a long time after he'd written those big novels, he didn't regard them as authentic art. I'm not sure why. But yeah, that idea that going back to the peasantry and that real art comes from the peasantry, I don't know, I'm not entirely on board with that. I think that when one consumes another person's creation, artistic creation, if there are any other kinds, then one interprets it through one's own filters, life experiences, level of education, relationships, whatever it might be, that it's still art if it moves you in a way that maybe you weren't expecting, So, yeah, I don't think you have to necessarily get exactly the same. In fact, I don't think you ever can get exactly the same feelings and emotions that the artist put into something. I don't think that's what you receive as an audience. I think what you receive is individual and unique to you, and that's how it should be. So it was a very interesting book. There are some highlights that I've made and some notes that I've taken. I might do a longer review of it. I don't know. If it's something you're interested in, let me know, and then I'll put something out. So that took me a while though. I started that, I think, in April, and I just kept putting it off. So I set myself the goal. I did my Notion thing, put the number of pages in, put the deadline in, read the pages, and here we are, finished the book. Did I give it? I can't even remember how many stars I gave it. You can check out my Goodreads for that, or my Storygraph. I track on both sites. So yeah, not a bad wee month really. And I've already talked a bit about my TBR. So we've got Fiji's, People's Tragedy. That's a read-along, which you're welcome to join, but you'll have some catching up to do because it's a big old book. I've got Robin Hobb, second book of Live Ship Traders. This one's The Mad Ship, another big old book. Third one, which is part of a read-along, Sense and Sensibility, as part of Jane Austen July, which I'm doing. I found that through Katie Lumsden, whose channel is Books and Things, and she's one of the co-hosts of Jane Austen July. So I bought this, actually, I worked it out, because as I was reading it, look what happened. A wee note fell out that my flatmate wrote to me, saying, "Dear Cams, hope you slept well. The sun is shining. Get out there and catch those rays." So from my flatmate, when I was at St Andrews Uni in 95, 96? 96, 97. When I was in my junior honours year, which means I bought this 96, 97 for the grand price of £1.99, back when black spines were a lot more affordable. I don't know how that works out with inflation and stuff. Was it actually cheaper? But bear in mind I was a student, so, you know, probably less affordable, perhaps. So Jane Austen July, I'll probably read this one and then stop. So the schedule is to have it read, I think, by the 16th of July. I'm reading the audiobook at the same time, narrated by Rosamund Pike, and she has the perfect English accent to read Jane Austen. I was telling my wife that, and she's like, "Aye, she was Jane in Pride and Prejudice." I was like, "Really? Didn't know that." She says, "Yeah, that's how I know her," because my wife is a big fan of TV adaptations and period dramas and all that. I said, "All right, I know her from Wheel of Time." So we're coming at Rosamund Pike from different angles, but we both love her, and as I say, she's the perfect narrator for Jane Austen. I might read the next one, which is Sanditon. That's the second book in Jane Austen July, if you follow the schedule. And then it finishes with another one called The Watsons. So I've never heard of either of those other two, nor have I read them. So, although if I had read them, I would have heard of them, wouldn't I? So those are the 3 books I've got scheduled and have already started. And a bonus book, which if I have time I will get to, is Bird on Bird. This was recommended in a Foster writers circle. I used to be one of the contributors in the Foster writing, what do you call it, community, I guess. And this was recommended by one of the workshop hosts. And then I was reminded of it by another YouTuber I follow from Hardy's Books, Ross. He posted a book haul where he'd scored a copy of this, I think from Oxfam. And I saw it and I was like, oh yeah, I've got that. So I would like to write more, and I think this will help me with that. So that's a bonus book. If I get to it, I get to it. That's me. Book wrap up for June 2024 and TBR for July. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Bye.